Well, we wrap up EDF 203 with Module 8. Now, we've arrived at the end of the course, and we're going to be taking a look in Module 8 at governance, finance, those operational kinds of things that are important to schools, how they're organized. And so you'll approach that kind of material in your reading. We'll be looking at chapters 11, 12, and 13 this week. Along the way, we're going to ask you to consider a couple of other issues, one of them not really related to this topic, the rest of them are. But one of the things we're going to ask you to do is take another practice exam. This one's a little different. This is for the Praxis 2 PLT. Now, the reason it's different is you won't take the PLT until you're in your methods courses, possibly even after methods. The PLT is the teaching and learning part of your assessment to become a teacher in the state of Kentucky. And our only purpose in having you take a practice test now is just so that you'll see the exam. The way the PLT is structured, you'll see a lot of case studies. Johnny's doing this in class and having that kind of problems, and then they'll ask you questions related to that case that they present. So I just want students to have an opportunity to see how the test is presented so that you can have that in the back of your mind as you progress through the rest of your courses, and just keep in mind how you'll have to respond to those when it finally comes down to time to take the PLT. We're going to do a final follow-up on our professional growth plan. The way this really would work, it would be a year-long kind of a process. Obviously, in 8 weeks, there isn't a whole lot of opportunity to improve on any kind of skills that you may have earlier identified as being weaknesses of yours. But what we want you to understand is the process. Professional development, when it's done best, is left in the control of the individual. That is, you as the teacher. You ought to be reflecting on your work all the time. You ought to have a pretty good idea of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. And the idea behind professional growth is really simple. How do we turn our weaknesses into strengths? Should we read a book, watch a movie? Should we go to a workshop? Should we attend some kind of professional development? How are we going to take a weakness and buff that up and make sure that it doesn't remain a weakness? That's the idea behind professional growth. Typically, you're going to have some help completing a professional growth plan because you're going to be working for a principal. And they may have some very clear ideas about areas where you need to improve. And you're going to have to work cooperatively with your principal on those. They may actually even assign you to do some things. But then the way it works is you understand what your plan is going to be for the year. You implement that plan, you attend, read, you do the things you say you're going to do. And at the end, you assess your growth. And this is all in preparation for next year's plan. So we've arrived at that point now, at least in our little 8-week scenario, where you go back, you take a look at the plan that you had developed earlier, pull that up, and then you do a last little kind of analysis of how you've done on that. We are going to ask you to consider teacher tenure in this module. You'll see samples of a limited contract offered to Madison County teachers and what they call a continuing contract. And we ask you to understand something about the differences between two and why that's important. And also to have some understanding of what it is you sign when you finally get that job as a teacher. What are you agreeing to do? So that'll be one of the things that we will deal with. And then finally, we'll end up with a little discussion board on Common Core, where you can discuss back and forth your opinions of the Common Core state standards, whether or not you think they're a good idea, a bad idea, and we'll wrap up with a little discussion of that. We also have our last quiz in Module 8, and that one's on the governance, finance, and legal aspects of education. Just in closing, this is the time when we kind of reflect back on our learning for the course, and I hope that you found EDF 102 to be a useful and informative course. I think you may come to appreciate it a little bit more once you get into some of your later courses where you're going to be focused a whole lot more on instruction. What this course is meant to do is provide kind of a framework for you to think about. as a teacher, we're going to have a particular job that we do. We think of it in terms of our children and what happens in class day to day, and that's very, very appropriate. But we don't do it alone. There is a larger structure that exists outside the classroom. It can be a source of frustration for teachers, or it can be a source of great support. Understanding what your resources are, understanding the governance and the way all these other ideas and theories and politics and history come to play inside your classroom are going to make you much better equipped to understand the profession and be more satisfied as a teacher. And ultimately, we want you to be effective in a career that is your choice and one where you are just outstanding. So thanks for being with me in this online EDF 203 course. I wish the best for you all in the future.